It's about that time of the week. Finally.
It sure is.
It's been a couple of them, but, you know.
It has. It's okay.
happens.
We've been on spring break in the Astral Sea with the Githyanki.
Yeah, dude. Also known as Chicago.
That's close enough to Limbo, right?
Yeah, depends on what you're there for.
That's true. That's very true.
Anyway, that's personal. Welcome to Summon Greater Podcast.
And you don't get to know why we've been gone. Because we're here anyway. We're back.
Summon Greater Podcast is, of course, a podcast about homebrew and homies. I'm Sam.
I'm Skyler. And this week, it's also about a teeny tiny bit of gambling addiction.
Gambling addiction.
Uh-huh. I caught the bug.
He caught the bug.
I've been playing Balatro, which I'm pretty sure is how it's pronounced. It is a poker roguelike game. Just like those two things sound like they should never go together.
I mean, I think I'm glad they do.
Me too. I'm ecstatic.
Mhm.
Poker is one of my favorite games. I suck at it, but it is so much fun.
Yeah.
I've been playing that nonstop for the past like 72 hours.
Yeah. You've had it on a lot. What's your playtime?
I don't know.
We're gonna check live.
12.2 hours.
Okay.
That's not bad.
That's not
That's
crazy.
not bad.
Because you've been playing for like, what, 4 days?
3.
3, yeah.
Yeah.
Happens.
A little over 12 hours in 3 days. It's not... It's not college dorm Risk of Rain bad. But it's...
No. It's not.
But it's close. Anyway, I love Balatro. Whole point of the game is you're playing poker and you earn money as you progress through hands and rounds and use that money to buy new cards for your deck that have like augmentations, or you can buy Joker cards that will power up specific hands or specific cards or suits or whatever, and your goal is to beat a certain amount of blinds or rounds. But it got me thinking about what if we had a D&D roguelike?
Yeah. How would you go about that, do you think?
It would be highly specific, and I think a lot of D&D players would not enjoy it because there wouldn't be any story, really.
Right. Yeah.
It would just be combat.
Mm-hmm.
But for the people like me who really, really enjoy building combat characters, and like comboing and things, I think it could be super fun.
Yeah. There are plenty of power gamers who would be into that shit. I think it would not translate well in a tabletop format.
Really?
I think you would be much better off with a video game format like Baldur's Gate because it's fast.
Yes, I can see that. I think
in a roguelike, you have a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, that would be the hard part, is keeping track of everything. I did kind of piece together a little bit of a document here with ideas of how I might do it if I did.
Yeah.
A lot of this take into account the fact that a lot of this would take serious prep as far as like creating a rollable table for several different things. So I think that I would do it in a way that there would be 3 different types of encounters you could get: combat encounter, stealth encounter, heist encounter.
Okay.
I would probably put that on a D4 roll, with 2 of the D4 numbers being combat, and then 1 being stealth and 1 being heist. Or honestly, you could do a protection encounter too, like escort somebody. But yeah, so different types of encounters. Obviously, it would be combat focused. It would ignore backstory. You're not going to have really any interaction with story themes in there. And then you would go through 3 different tiers of bosses. Tier 1 would be like CR 1 through CR 8. Tier 2 would be 9 through 14, and Tier 3 would be 15 through 20. So, and I haven't attempted to balance any of this at all yet, so this is super rough draft.
So would you be playing this at like pretty high level from the jump?
I think I would start at level 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. But you'll level up throughout the course of a run. Jeez.
Yeah. Because that's what, like, getting, like, Tier 1, I don't want it to be too difficult. Tier 2 is where it'd be like, all right, now we're getting into a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
And then Tier 3 is where it's like CR 15 through 20, which is like the big stuff, where it's like, okay, now you really want to have your shit together. But part of the way that I think you could make the combat go a little bit faster is have a set number of turns total that you can take. You can only take 10 turns.
Yeah.
Strip all bosses of mythical and legendary abilities, save for maybe one legendary action and a legendary resistance at Tier 3.
Okay.
Maybe give a legendary resistance at Tier 2 and then like an action and a resistance at Tier 3. But Tier 1, no additional stuff, just spells, like regular abilities and actions that they have. Yeah, so maximum of 10 turns in combat. I think that's a good way to speed things up. And I would say that if you defeat it, you get like the full amount of XP, which would be 2 level ups. If you don't defeat it, but you survive 10 rounds, you get 1 level up and you move on.
Okay. Yeah.
Because that way it'll get you through the levels a little bit. And then post combat, what I would love to do for this is have a deck of cards with all of the different feats on it that you can get in D&D. Because then at the end of combat, shuffle up the deck, deal out 3 cards at random. You can flip those and pick from one of the 3 feats to just apply to your character and move on. In addition to leveling up and level up bonuses. So by the end of this, you're going to have a bunch of extra feats and a bunch of extra stuff on your character, which is going to be necessary for when you get to Tier 3 and there's maybe 1 or 2 of you going up against a really, really powerful boss monster.
Yeah.
And then also at the end of combat, you can loot the body if you killed it. So like if they have a signature weapon or signature armor or like a signature spell that they used, you can maybe get like a spell scroll or something.
You should still have to make an investigation check for that.
Fuck yeah, absolutely. But then in between rounds of combat, after you go through like the immediate post combat, there will be a merchant. Just like there is in Balatro, where you can there's a shop, you can buy new jokers, new cards, whatever. At the merchant, you can buy there will be 1 slot for either a weapon or armor. And again, you'd have to build a table and roll on the table for either weapon or armor, and then which one. And then in another section, 2 choices of either a wondrous item or a totem, which would be a party buff. If you're comparing this to Balatro, that would be the jokers. Where like if you get a like a melee totem or something like that, all of your melee attacks get a +2 to attack and damage rolls or something like that. And that doesn't really take up attunement slots or anything. That's just something that you hold on to and apply to you and your party. There's also a section where you can buy either a stat buff or a level up. That's obviously going to be more expensive, but oh yeah, also post combat, you get a certain amount of gold. And then another merchant slot, there would be 4 like minor things that you can get, and that'll be kind of a random selection of either potions, skill proficiencies, or spell scrolls. So like if you're a spellcaster and you can stock up on scrolls and potions because you may not need a weapon or armor, blah, 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 blah. And then obviously build a table for potions, build a table for spell scrolls that you want to use. And then it would be like roll for a skill proficiency. And if you already have proficiency, you gain expertise. So that's all I had written down really as far as like planning it out, but I thought it would be really interesting to test it sometime and just see if it would work. Because theoretically, you could do this with like 2 people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It could be really, really fun. It's
this
just
would
like
be fun to try out.
practicing a dungeon crawl kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I should throw in a short or long rest mechanic somewhere in there.
Oh, probably. Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if you do 2 bosses, 2 encounters in tier 1, 2 encounters in tier 2, and then 1 encounter in tier 3.
Mm-hmm.
You could do a short rest at the end of each encounter and a long rest at the end of each tier.
That makes sense. Yeah.
It's like tier 1, first encounter, short rest, second encounter, long rest. And then go to tier 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because in that way, you're kind of incorporating a little bit of Hades into it too, with the like moving from one location to the next.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
I'm into that. Yeah. That's a pretty sick idea.
Mm-hmm. But speaking of creating new things.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Critical Role did something pretty cool.
They're making a new system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Daggerheart.
And it looks pretty fucking sick.
It looks very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
This is more like we were just talking about this earlier. There's some things in here that make me think a little bit of Candela Obscura, which is a system that they have also created recently. But this feels a little more in line with D&D in some ways. It's a little more combat focused. Mm-hmm. Not, of course, at the expense of role play or anything else. But there's it's more combat is more fleshed out in here.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job of balancing like having combat still be a big part of why you play the game.
Yeah,
but making it a story within that combat.
Yes.
Most notable difference between we'll do like a compare and contrast with D&D 5th edition here. Most notable difference, it is not a D20 system. It is 2D12, which is crazy. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my D20 system, but this 2D12 one looks really cool.
Yeah. The critical success mechanic is very interesting here. Mm-hmm. It is you get a critical success whenever you roll doubles.
Yeah.
Which is drastically different.
Another big change, the reason why there are 2D12 is because they use a new system that they came up with called Hope. So one of your 2D12s is a Hope die, and the other is a Fear die. Mm-hmm. And you have 2 different colored D12s, so you can represent that, because you don't get to choose every time. You roll them both, and one of them is predetermined to be Hope, and the other is predetermined to be Fear. So when the GM sets the difficulty of a roll, you roll your 2d12, add whatever modifiers you have, but there is a little sub thing happening with the Hope and the Fear dice, which is really cool. When you roll for a check, an attack, whatever it may be, when your Hope die gets a higher result than the Fear die, you are considered rolling with Hope. You get to gain an additional Hope as noted by the Hope slots on your character sheet. There are a certain number of Hope slots that you get, and that can increase as the campaign goes on or decrease for other reasons.
Do you have like 2 differently colored die to denote which is okay? Yeah.
Yeah. So they talked about how like some people will use like a yellow and a blue or a red and a black, and you can pick whatever you want, but just enough that like at a glance you can look down and be, that was the Hope die or that was the Fear die. And we'll go into what the Hope does later, but if you roll higher result on your Fear die, there is a complication even if you succeed.
Yeah.
So the GM gains their version of a hope point, which is a
Mhm.
fear point, which they can use to do similar things with major enemies.
That's scary.
It's really cool, and
Uh-huh.
I love the way that it pushes the narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really interesting. It is a very clear intention to tie combat directly into your role play and into the story as a whole.
Yeah.
And I like that a whole lot.
Mm-hmm. Another interesting addition, or I was an interesting change to a mechanic that exists in D&D. You have advantage and disadvantage. Roll twice, take the higher. Roll twice, take the lower. Whatever that may be. Advantage and disadvantage in Daggerheart is different because it is a positive or negative D6 that you also roll.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're rolling with advantage, you roll 2d12 and 1d6. So you still have your hope mechanic in there, and then you just have an additional flat modifier from the d6.
Okay, we're replacing advantage with inspiration.
Kind of, but here's the thing.
Uh-huh.
Our table uses a very different version of inspiration than what D&D actually has
Oh shit,
listed.
do we?
Yeah, we do. Because on
What do we do
D&D,
different?
like in D&D rules as written,
Uh-huh.
inspiration lets you give yourself advantage.
Oh, it's been so long that I forgot.
Mm-hmm. I did too. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like,
like we don't do
we
that.
just add dice.
Yeah.
Like we just say, here, take a d6 advantage.
Uh-huh.
So we're kind of already, or not advantage, inspiration.
Uh-huh.
So we're kind of already using something similar to this in at our tables.
Yeah.
We're just calling it inspiration rather than advantage.
Uh-huh. I
Interesting
completely
with
forgot.
that.
We've done that for so long.
Mm-hmm. I know. And it was funny to me too, because I think there was exactly one conversation had with all of our players at one point where we talked about inspiration and what it would look like. And then everyone promptly forgot. And we all gravitated toward the exact same version of inspiration at all of our tables.
Are we sure that's not rules as written then?
Yeah. Yeah.
We just did that?
I mean, I'll look it up just to be safe. Inspiration, awarding inspiration, blah, 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 blah. Having inspiration gives a character an obvious benefit. Being able to gain advantage on one ability check, attack roll, or saving throw.
Huh.
That is rules as written.
Wow.
Yeah. Someone at one point mentioned like, oh, I've heard some people add a d6 instead of using advantage. And we all were just like, oh, huh, that's cool. And then in all of our tables, we were like, so here's your d6 inspiration. Here's your d6 inspiration. Yeah. And we like never thought about it.
Huh. That's so interesting.
So, yeah. I don't know. Why don't you guys tell us what version of inspiration you like to use at the table? Do you do something different? Because inspiration is the most flexible mechanic in all of D&D. Like, you can do whatever you want. You're the DM. You can say, for your inspiration, I don't know, do a handstand and I'll let you automatically succeed. Like, yeah.
Can you give me an example of what the GM might do with fear?
Yes. As a player, rolling with fear does not mean that your action roll failed, but you'll face some type of complication. For example, you might only learn partial information, you might face a strike from the enemy you just attacked, or you might encounter an unexpected danger. If you also failed the action roll where you rolled fear, you'll instead face major consequences or complications. When you roll with fear, it doesn't get recorded on your character sheet. Instead, the GM not only determines which complications result from your fear roll, but they also collect a fear. So one of the things, there's a recommended mechanic in Daggerheart. It's not part of the core's rule set or anything, but they recommend using countdowns. So like if you're in combat, there may be 5 more turns until a volcano erupts or something. I don't know. So one thing you can do with fear is you can tick down a countdown. So you can spend a fear point to speed things up. Some bigger adversaries will have fear moves, they're called, where your player characters will have hope moves, where they can spend a hope to activate an ability. enemies will have fear moves where they can spend a fear to activate an ability.
Yeah.
You can also use a fear to give yourself advantage on a roll. This is yourself being the GM playing an adversary at this point. Or you can remove a condition that the player characters have placed on that adversary. Or you can add an additional d6 of damage dice. And, this is fun. We'll talk about what this means later, but add 2 tokens to the action tracker. And for 2 fear, you can interrupt the player characters to take an action. So if they're in the middle of doing something, you can just be like, boop, I'm doing something now.
That is so interesting. What was the thing you said you were going to get? The action tracker? Yeah.
Yeah. So really quick first, let me talk about how you can use hope, because it's very, very similar.
Okay.
Just so we can clarify that all that's out there. Using hope as a player character, you can, in 3 major ways, use it. Help an ally. You roll a d6 advantage die to add to an ally's action roll.
Yes.
If multiple allies use this ability to help one person, they all spend their hope points and roll, but only the highest roll gets applied to the allies thing. Utilize an experience is another way that you can use hope. Excuse me. You may add a modifier tied to a specific experience to your roll. Multiple experiences can be added if applicable. So this is something that is part of the character creation and story building of the world. When you're creating your character, you get to choose abstract experiences that your character would have had, and you can talk to the GM as you're building your character and be like, in what ways can I use this experience that I want them to have had to influence things they're able to do right now. So you can spend a hope point to draw from that experience and add a modifier to your stuff. You can also activate a hope feature. So again, some spells, some attacks, some abilities require a hope point to be able to fully activate. But yeah, so moving on to the action tracker thing that I mentioned. Where is the combat? So this is one of the parts where I'm not fully there yet on exactly how this is going to work. So I'm going to see if I can really quick pull up the section where they talk about all of that.
While you're doing that, it kind of had me thinking of Risk of Rain, because of course, but like the game kind of has it has this process running in the background called the director, which is basically a GM program. And it has an allotted amount of credits per stage that it uses on spawning enemies over time and spawning like interactables and then like doing some other math shit. But there are things you can do to increase the amount of credits that the director has to spend on the next stage. For example, spending time. Because the more time you spend, the more difficult the game gets. But in particular, the more time you spend on a stage, the more credits the director has at the beginning of the next one.
Oh, okay.
So the whole like fear thing as a system of credits effectively had me thinking of like how that kind of works.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah,
I didn't know that was a thing that was going on in Risk of Rain.
Yep. There's a popular mod where a person can take control of the directors and like be the DM themselves for your run.
Bro,
it's cool. I've not gotten to try it, but we totally should.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like obviously you play that game way more than I do, but I think it would be freaking sick to be the GM behind your run.
I think we should totally try that. Yeah.
That is so cool. Wow. All right, let me see, because I found the part where it talks about the action tracker.
Okay.
The reason why I'm still a little confused on this is because I don't see anything that clarifies what counts as a turn.
Mm-hmm.
Big change from D&D to Daggerheart. There is no initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And there are no rounds. I might have just answered my own question.
Okay.
There are no rounds. There is no initiative. And there is no distinct number of actions that you can take per turn.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, any fights that happen play out narratively from moment to moment. So this is a yes and combat.
Okay.
It really rewards you for being improv focused and narrative focused. So this provides players opportunities to team up together in their tactics, respond appropriately to narrative changes in the scene, and not be locked into only doing violence once the first strike happens. So it gives you a lot of opportunity to do different things. Where I think I got worked up was I was trying to figure out what constitutes a turn, but when I said the word turn, what I was thinking of was turn order.
Oh, okay.
So I was thinking like, because there was a lot of stuff that was mentioned throughout this playtest material referring to can only happen once per turn or once. Yeah, like you can't do more than one, or I don't know. There was a lot of stuff that mentioned per turn economy. And I thought I had it mixed up in my head. I thought they were talking about turn order.
Okay.
So I think I answered my own question. But anyway, action tracker. Whenever there's a combat scenario that is likely to last more than a roll or two, or when play moves to maps and miniatures at the GM's discretion, the GM should place the action tracker card on the table within everyone's reach. Whenever PCs make an action roll, they must place a character token onto the action tracker. While on the tracker, these are known as action tokens. It's important to note that the tokens are not limited. If a player ever runs out, you just get more tokens. PCs are not the only ones who can use the action tracker, however. The GM spends action tokens to activate adversaries as well. Hence the fear thing. While the action tracker is on the table, it's important to remember that players may still act in any order they'd like and take action multiple times in a row as the narrative flow demands it. The game should continue as normal. The GM just has an additional tool at their disposal to help guide the combat encounter. However, players are encouraged to give others turns with the spotlight. If another player hasn't placed any tokens on the action tracker recently, consider letting them act if they want to before you do anything else. So it's just basically a visual aid as far as I'm putting a token on the action tracker. I'm going to do the thing. And then someone else chimes in and goes, when he does that, I would like to respond by helping and do this thing at the same time or whatever. And you can just yes and combat. And so the action tracker is there so the GM can look and go, oh, so-and-so, you haven't put an action a token on the tracker. Do you want to do something or are you waiting? And then that person can go, yeah, actually, I'd really like to jump in and help with this and this and this. There were just a lot of people talking, so I was waiting my turn. Or they can say like, I love what they're doing. I have something that I'd like to do when they are done. I'm going to let them all finish their thing and then I'm going to have something to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Combat in Daggerheart. I want to try it bad.
Dude, I really want to try this. This is the first system I've looked at it in like a while where I've been like, my table could do this and should try this.
Yeah. This is something that honestly would be very easily adapted to D&D.
It would and could be, but I kind of like want to try the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I want to play Daggerheart too. Yeah. But what I'm saying is like, if you're at a table that is super roleplay heavy, use the Daggerheart combat method. Use an action tracker.
Yeah.
Just put tape over your initiative modifier on your character sheet.
Really good for our kind of table.
Yeah. Now, obviously, there are a lot of tables out there that are in the game for the mechanics, and they love the mechanics of it. And having the unpredictability of who's going when in combat is part of the fun of like, that changes our tactics. Now we got to think on the fly.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people love that kind of stuff. And you don't have to do something like this. I mean, hell, even if you want to play Daggerheart, you can homebrew an initiative modifier into Daggerheart if that's something that you really, really want to do. I will say that if you are in it more for the mechanics than you are for the story, Daggerheart may be a bit tougher for you, and we can get into a little bit of why that is, because the character creation is so heavy on roleplay. So heavy on roleplay.
Okay.
It's really fucking cool.
I'm interested to hear.
So, when you go to create a character, Daggerheart uses a deck of cards to represent like the species that you can be, the classes, subclasses that you can be. So, if you were to buy a paper copy of the game, you would get a deck of cards, and you would hold on to those cards as like reminders of like, this is what your class does, this is what your subclass does, and a lot of those cards will have a specific feature on them. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 classes. Some of them will sound very familiar to D&D fans. You have Bard, Druid, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Wizard. But then they've changed a couple of them. A new one that they have is the Guardian class. There is also the Seraph class and the Warrior class. Now, if you might have guessed, Warrior is kind of like your fighter. You run into battle without hesitation or caution, knowing you can strike down whatever enemy may stand in your path. So you can kind of flavor that toward whatever type of warrior/fighter that you want. Seraph, kind of like cleric with a little bit of paladin mixed in. As a seraph, you have taken a vow to a god that helps you channel sacred arcane power to keep your party on their feet. Guardian, I think, is my personal favorite of the changes that they've made. It's basically paladin minus the magic. And when I said that earlier, you mentioned like, oh, like just like a knight. Yeah, exactly. I think that's perfect. As a guardian, you run into danger to protect your party, keeping watch over those who might not survive without you there. So very, very much like taking the strongest elements of paladins as far as like, I will be the wall, I'll be the tank. And bits and pieces of fighter that are like, I can use heavy armor, I can use the big shields and things like that. I think it's super freaking cool. Part of creating these classes in this new system was they have the skills and like stats just like in D&D. They're a little different, but they have the same core 6 stats that you can use. And then they also have domains, which are core themes that make up each class. Each class is a combination of 2 different domains. There's the Arcana domain of the innate or instinctual use of magic. The Blade domain, this is the domain of those who dedicate their lives to the mastery of weapons. There is the Bone domain. This is the domain of mastery of swiftness and tactical mastery. The Codex domain, which is the domain of intensive magical study. And the Grace domain, the domain of charisma. The Midnight domain of shadows and secrecy. The Sage domain, the domain of the natural world. Splendor domain, which is the domain of life, and the Valor domain, which is the domain of protection. So each of the classes, each of the 9 classes is a combination of 2 domains. So I just opened up Bard. Bard is a combination of the Grace and Codex domain. So Grace domain is the domain of charisma. Makes sense for a Bard. And the Codex domain of intense magical study. Again, kind of reminiscent of the D&D 5th edition Bard.
Yes.
Taking a college as their subclass.
Also wizard.
Very much so. And then you have like the Rogue, which combines the Midnight and Grace domain. So again, charisma with the Grace domain, and then Midnight domain being shadow and secrecy.
Yeah.
So I like what they did, because then in having those domains, each domain has its own card, and you get domain abilities based on that. So these are like your level up class abilities in D&D. Instead of having those tied to the specific class, they're tied to the specific domains. So you can kind of pick and choose domain abilities based on which 2 domains your class is slotted into. So you could wind up with a lot of extremely similar, taking the rogue and the bard, for example, extremely similar grace domain abilities between the 2 characters. Maybe your bard and your rogue are like have the same personality kind of a thing. But then combining that, rogues have the Midnight domain and bards have the Codex domain, so you get some different abilities in there as well. I'm not going to go into all of the different domain abilities that you can get, because we'd be here for the next 12 hours.
I mean, what I'm seeing is very interesting. It looks like, if I understand what you're saying correctly, when you level up, you get card choice. Am I right?
Yes.
And depending on your class and the domains from which it derives, you get a choice of cards between 2 domains. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So there are ability and spell cards that I'm seeing. I'm guessing, I mean, abilities sound like feats to me. I'm just on the first page. I'm seeing shit like armor for, what is this domain? Valor. Where your armor score increases by +1 while this ability is in your loadout. During a short rest, you can choose to take the repair armor downtime action, where everybody in your party also clears 1 additional armor slot.
Yeah.
Or sorry, this is a tangent, but I've been looking at this spell in particular. Banish. Choose a target creature within close range. You can temporarily banish them from this realm. Roll an amount of d20s equal to your spellcast trait and tell the GM the highest result. The GM must make a reaction roll with the target number of this result.
Ooh.
That's a really interesting way to do a DC.
Yeah, I like that. That's fascinating.
If the target succeeds, they mark a stress. If they fail, once per short rest, they are banished. So it's like a recurring thing. That's so weird. Every time any player rolls with fear, the GM reduces the target number by 1 and makes another reaction roll. If it succeeds, the creature returns from banishment.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a lot of stuff that, like, the very specific wording of this makes me think like, okay, I think there's something here that I'm missing just a little bit, but I love what parts I do understand. Like the once per short rest thing. I'm like, all right,
something's going on.
What else is going on?
Yeah. It's interesting that it's recurring like that, or it seems to be.
Yeah, and then there's the ability Bare Bones, which I just saw. It was really, really fun. While this card's in your loadout, if you choose not to wear armor, your armor score is equal to 3 plus double your strength trait.
Done bad.
Yeah. Like, there's your barbarian unarmored defense and stuff like that.
Yep.
Super freaking cool. So, suffice to say, there are incredible abilities and domain cards and things that you can get. I love this so much. You can also choose a subclass. Yes. The one bummer is that since this is in such early access and playtesting, there are only 2 subclasses per class right now.
Yeah.
But that's the nature of the beast.
Yes.
When D&D first came out, they didn't have much either.
Honestly, at this point, it's also just enough to work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can give you Rogue, Syndicate, and Nightwalker. You play the Syndicate if you want to know somebody helpful everywhere you go. You play the Nightwalker if you want to use the cover of shadow to navigate your environment.
Oh, here. Okay, I found the correct thing. That is sick as hell. Bard subclasses. Wordsmith. Play the wordsmith if you want to be persuasive and powerful using clever wordplay. Self-explanatory. Troubadour. Play the troubadour if you want to play music to bolster your allies. So fairly basic bard stuff. Druid has wild touch. You can perform harmless, subtle effects that involve nature at will. Oh, sorry, that's a class feature. That's not. I'm getting confused. Warden of the Elements is the first subclass. Okay. Play the Warden of the Elements if you want to embody the natural elements of nature. And then there's the Warden of Renewal. Play the Warden of Renewal if you want to use powerful magic to heal your party members. We finally have a subclass for Druid that focuses on healing.
Yeah.
I think that's really sick.
Yes.
Because in D&D, Druids can heal. They have a lot of really, really, really good healing spells. But we don't really have a subclass that talks about that or focuses on that at all.
There's nothing that makes it the primary function of the Druid.
Right. Yeah. And then
looking at Sorcerer, we got Primal Origin and Elemental Origin. You play the Primal Origin if you want to modify your spells in powerful ways. So that's the
meta
magic type stuff. You play Elemental Origin if you want to use raw elemental magic in creative ways.
That sounds cool.
I can't think of what that necessarily translates to off the top of my head. That's kind of a new wording.
I think that's definitely something new for the class. I have Guardian here. Guardian subclasses are the Stalwart Guardian. Play the Stalwart Guardian if you want to be able to take heavy blows and keep moving. Or the Vengeance Guardian. Play the Vengeance Guardian if you want to strike down enemies that hurt you or your allies. I like that. I think they're very, very basic, but I think they are necessarily basic, and I think they're going to be really good anyway.
A theme I'm noticing with the wording for a lot of these subclasses is they first look to character traits, which I think is, like you mentioned earlier, a new way to think of character creation. Not a new one necessarily, but it's differently focused than D&D's character creation.
Yeah, it's a new way to create a character as supported by the system.
Yeah, and very much, again, how our table looks at character creation often.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to do like at least a one shot with Daggerheart. Yeah. I'm super excited.
I would love to do like a short campaign of a few sessions even.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Ranger subclasses, Wayfinder. Play Wayfinder if you want to hunt your prey using deadly force. And Beastbound if you want to develop a deep bond with an animal ally. I have Seraph here. Winged Sentinel. Play the Winged Sentinel Seraph if you want to take flight and strike hard from the sky.
Nice.
Immediately I'm like, that one? Can I play that one, please? That is like, you get to be an angel. Like, how friggin' cool is that?
Yeah.
That's my trauma from D&D, taking away all of my character race's wings and being like, if you want to fly, be a bird. I don't want to be a bird.
I want the wings. I don't want the beak. It seems inconvenient.
How hard is it to have wings and teeth?
It sounds hard to kiss.
And then the other Seraph subclass is the Divine Wielder. Play the Divine Wielder if you want to dominate the battlefield with a legendary weapon.
Oh.
This sounds like spiritual weapon on fucking crack.
Oh, probably. Yeah. Yeah. It probably makes a ton of use of that mechanic.
Did
I talk about wizard stuff? I don't think I talked about wizard stuff. School of Knowledge, if you want to have incredible knowledge of the magical world around you. Or you play the School of War if you want to be trained to use magic as a means of violence.
Ooh.
That's your warcaster right there.
That's your warcaster right there. School of Knowledge, I think, is interesting. I think that it's a really good catch-all for how early they are in the development of the system.
Yes, I could see them revising that and splitting it.
I think it would be cool. Or at the very least, giving us more specializations. But I guarantee we're going to get so many more subclasses.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also the warrior subclasses. You can play a Call of the Slayer warrior, which I'm like, okay, badass. Play Call of the Slayer if you want to ensure you strike down enemies with great power. And there's also Call of the Brave. Play Call of the Brave if you want to be adept at taking on both harrowing tasks and dangerous enemies. So I think these are both really interesting. I think that they are alluding to new mechanics for Daggerheart. Call of the Brave specifically made me think like, okay, you're probably interacting a lot with both fear and hope. And Call of the Slayer obviously is more along the lines of like your great weapon master feat and things that allow you to just do more damage in a single strike. So I'm really excited for this. Specifically, just we haven't even talked about what combat looks like, what the character sheets look like, but like character creation is going to be so much fun.
Yes.
Because on top of choosing your class and subclass, you also get to pick ancestry, community, choose your equipment. Like there's so much really cool stuff. Ancestries are going to be like your character's species. My favorite part is that they looked at Warforged and they were like, all right, how do we change the name so D&D doesn't sue us? And they went, Clank. You're a Clank.
I feel like there's so many things I could have picked.
I know. It cracks me up. I honestly, I would hope that one gets a slight revision to something that sounds a little cooler, but it absolutely works. And then there is Demon, which is just Tiefling.
Yeah, that image is as Tiefling as it could possibly be.
Yeah. And then Dracona, which are Dragonborn. You've got your Dwarf, got your Elf, you've got your Fairy. Fawn is another one. Furbolgs are in Daggerheart, which made me very happy.
Yes.
And then Fungrels.
Resembles a mushroom. Bearing the features of the fungus from which they descend.
And then Galapa. You can play
that's a tortoise.
As a turtle.
They put Master Oogway on the image.
They really did. That is so funny. You can also play as a giant.
Hell yeah, you can.
And it is up to you if you have 1 or 2 eyes. They are whatever you want. It's a giant.
Just be a Cyclops.
Yeah. I'm glad Goblin's there. Halfling is there. Human is there.
Yes.
And then
Katari.
Which are your Leonin or Tabaxi, depending on which route you're going.
Just a feline looking person.
Mm-hmm.
You got orc, and is that a frog?
Yes, it is.
That's a ribbit.
Ribbits. You can be a ribbit.
Simia is the last one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a monkey.
And then there are options for how to make a character with mixed ancestry, which I think is really cool.
Interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of Daggerheart is very heavily focused on how do you identify yourself? How does your character identify yourself? There's not a lot of restrictive material as far as like, if you are part this and part this, this is what you are and what you were referred to as.
Yeah.
You can choose, which I think is awesome because that's something that's honestly been kind of missing in D&D is, I'm not going to say representation because you can represent yourself however you want, but the game encouraging you to craft your own identity is something that's kind of not really a big mechanic deal in D&D. So I actually really like the fact that they put it in Daggerheart and they're like, we're not going to tell you what you are. What are you? You tell us. Like, I think that's super fun. Yeah. And then when you choose your ancestry card for your character, you can choose from any of the ancestry features from your lineage to become part of your loadout. So you can pick and choose. If you're from 2 different ancestries, you can pick and choose ancestry features from either of the ancestries based on what you want. After the ancestry, there is community. So this is like your character's background. So they don't have a huge number of communities right now to choose from, but there's a highborn, which is like your noble type of thing. Loreborn, which is kind of like a sage, like you have a strong academic background. Orderborn, which is you grew up in a community with a lot of discipline or faith. So that could be maybe military, maybe religious.
Where are you seeing these?
So from the top of the page, I went to library and the play test, and then I just scrolled down to where it says community.
Seaborn.
Seaborn is a fun one.
You're a sailing little bitch.
Ridgeborn also. You grew up in the mountains or on a cliff or something.
Naturally.
Slyborn. You're a criminal. Urchin. Street rat. Aladdin. I don't know. Something.
Underborn. You're from a subterranean society.
Yeah.
Living beneath a city or village.
That one took me like it's still taking me a minute to like remind my brain, because when I hear Underborn, I think of like underbelly. So I'm thinking of like a criminal organization.
I was thinking of Underdark.
Oh,
like
yeah.
a different plane.
That
kinda.
too.
Yeah.
Wanderborn. You're a nomad. You don't really live no place. You just go where you want to go.
Wildborn. You were raised by a clan deep within the forest. You're Mowgli.
You are Mowgli. Not necessarily raised by animals, but hey, you can do that if you
You're
want.
Raised by animals.
But yeah, so all of that. And then...
These all, by the way, give a little buff. I think we should mention that, or a feature rather.
Okay.
For example, Wildborn gives you Lightfoot. Your movement is naturally silent. You take advantage on any action rolls you make to move without being heard. Interesting way to phrase that, because normally we would just call that a stealth roll.
Yeah.
Underborn gives you low light living. When you're in an area with low light or heavy shadow, you have advantage on rolls to hide and investigate or perceive details within that area. Okay, so our stealth rolls are a little more specified to conditions.
Gotcha. I like the Wanderborn one. Nomadic pack. Once per session, you can spend a hope to just reach into your backpack and pull out a common item that could be useful in the situation. Like you can just, I've got something for that.
Yeah. Seaborn gives you safe harbor once per session when you... Per session? Interesting. When you take a short or long rest, you may take one additional downtime action. We're going to have to talk about downtime actions, I think.
Yes.
It's reminiscent of Brancalonia a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. They definitely have pulled some of the like ideology from that into a more D&D version, like a shorter term version of downtime.
Yes. Orderborn gives you dedicated. You record 3 sayings or values your upbringing instilled in you. And once per short rest, when you describe how you're embodying one of these principles through your current action, you may roll with a d20 as your hope die instead of a d12.
That's insane.
That's very interesting.
You've got your mantras. You're just working through your mantras. Highborn has inheritance. You have advantage on any rolls you make when consorting with nobles, negotiating prices, or leveraging your reputation to get what you want.
Fucking Nepo baby.
And you get an extra handful of gold at character creation.
That's pretty good.
I like that. There's a lot of really, really fun stuff. That has been my biggest disappointment with D&D, is how background abilities are hardly ever used.
Yeah. No, it's really true. Like, I forget they exist a lot of the time.
Yeah, because a lot of the times they're so ridiculously specific on what they even interact with. So it's like, well, all right. I think before we talk about the downtime stuff, it would probably be smart to talk about damage and like combat and armor and things like that. So I'm going to hit this really fast because there's a lot of details in here. I may not get all of them. I may not touch on all of them. I might get some of them a little wrong. Highly encourage you guys to check out the Daggerheart playtest on your own and read through all of this. There is a ton of material here, and I don't want to clog everything up with, and then when this happens, X thing triggers and blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to try and hit it quick and just get the core elements of it. So specifically for your armor, you have on your character sheet both an evasion score and an armor score.
That's very interesting.
We
are splitting the armor class into the two things that it actually represents.
Yes. Like this is like your distinction between monk and barbarian. Very much. So your evasion score denotes the value that enemies need to roll in order to hit your character. So if you have a really high evasion score, it's going to be harder for people to hit you at all. Your armor score is the static amount of protection that your armor provides. So on your character sheet, you will have a number of armor slots. I believe you start with 3, and there are ways to increase that. When you are hit, you can spend an armor slot to reduce the amount of damage that attack would deal by your armor score. So if you have a really high armor score, you don't necessarily need to worry about having an evasion score because you can just tank the hit. Armor slots are expendable. So every class has armor slots. I think you all start with 3 that you can use to reduce the damage. When you've used all of your armor slots, your armor is considered broken until you use a downtime action to repair it or have an armory repair it for you. So damage is dealt differently in Daggerheart than it is in D&D. They have also kind of taken damage and split it in half.
Okay.
Which is really interesting. This is absolutely fascinating. So attacks deal damage, but not directly to your hit points. Each class has damage thresholds.
Okay.
That determine how many HP are lost. Minor, major, and severe thresholds have slightly varying values based on your class or an enemy's strengths. So your minor damage threshold, let's say you get your minor damage is 4, your major is 6, and your severe is 8. That's not what they actually are. I'm just using this for thinking about it. So you get hit by an attack. They achieve your evasion score or higher to hit you. Then they roll for damage. Let's say they rolled 2 points of damage. So that does not hit your minor damage threshold. So you don't take any hit points of damage.
Interesting.
Instead, you get 1 stress point because they hit you, but not hard enough to deal damage.
Yeah.
Stress points, I'm going to table that for like 2 minutes. And we'll come back to stress points. So if they, again, looking at your minor, major, and severe, 4, 6, and 8, if they dealt you 5 damage that hits your minor damage threshold, you take 1 hit point of damage.
Okay.
They roll 7 damage. That hits your major damage threshold, you take 2 hit points. And severe, if they hit that, you take 3 hit points.
Okay. So we're working with like low hit point totals, I assume.
I think you have 10.
Okay. Just everybody? Huh.
And I think, again, there are ways to increase that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so wizards, very low damage thresholds. Guardians, very high damage thresholds. So not having to track hit points and how that increases and everything, it's less math. I think it simplifies things from a moving from one level to the next kind of a situation.
Yeah.
Once you learn the basic mechanics, this will be much easier to go from first level up to maximum level. So anyway, damage below a minor injury induces a stress point. Stress can also be induced to activate some abilities or acquired as the result of like complications on a roll. So if you rolled a success with your fear die as the higher value, maybe you take a stress point while you're succeeding on the thing. You have a certain amount of stress. I think it's also 10. If your stress pool is full and you would take stress from damage, then you instead take 1 hit point. You can also, if you would spend stress to activate an ability or something and your stress pool is full, you can also spend another stress point to take 1 hit point of damage instead.
Okay.
So basically, it's a lot of different ways that your character can avoid like severe amounts of damage from 1 hit. It's kind of a way to make sure that no one is going to get one shot in combat.
Yeah.
Like you're going to have opportunities to heal or continue doing things. There's not going to be a boss that comes in and natural 20 critical hit. Your character takes 175 hit points of damage. Oh no, your maximum hit points were only 65. You're permadead. Yeah. So I like it. Coming from D&D, I'm looking at this going, okay, so what just happened and how many things do I have to look at now? But I think once I learn that, this could be a really intuitive, really, really fun way of doing damage.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me about the stress pool.
So there's not really a ton else actually to talk about with the stress pool. It's kind of, it has a sub feature kind of like Hope, where some of your abilities will require you to, when you use this, you take a stress point, kind of a thing. It's like a sub hit point.
That's kind of how it sounds. What are the things, like, can something cause your stress pool to increase in capacity?
I would assume so.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten deep enough into nitty gritty details to find out what that might be. I think it kind of goes along the lines of like, as you level up, maybe you get an ability, maybe there's a card that you get that allows you to increase your stress pool or increase your hit point pool or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that kind of leads into downtime. Short rests are an hour. Long rests are relax for a few hours and then get some sleep. So they don't really put a time limit on long rests, but I would assume it's around 8 hours again. Excuse me. Downtime activities. Short rest activities you can do. Tend to wounds. You can temporarily patch up yourself or an ally, and you can clear 1d4 hit points that have been marked off.
Yeah.
Clear stress. Same thing. Describe how you blow off steam or pull yourself together and clear 1d4 stress points. Repair armor. You can spend time quickly repairing your armor, and you can clear off 2 of your marked armor slots. You can also do this to an ally's armor. And then you can prepare. Describe how you're preparing yourself for the path ahead and gain 1 hope. Now, those are all short rest. For long rests, you have the same abilities, but instead of clearing 1d4 hit points stress or clearing 2 armor slots, clear all of it. And then for prepare, slight addendum, in a long rest, if you prepare in tandem with another character and you kind of describe how you prepare together, each of you regains 2 hope instead of 1. There's an additional long rest activity that you can do called work on a project. You can either establish or continue a project that you want to do, and that is fully between you and the DM what that project might be. Maybe you're building a new piece of armor, or you're trying to craft a weapon or something, or learn a spell.
The focus on what you're doing in downtime being a rule is a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I
absolutely
like the necessity of needing something to do. I don't know. It just like having the GM and the rules remind you constantly of like what your character is thinking about. I don't think it's necessary for every table, but it is nice to have, especially maybe for newer role players. I think
my favorite part about this for the short rest is that you can do these things to allies.
Yeah.
So like if you're totally good on hit points and stress points, but you want to do something for someone else, if someone else took a lot of hit points and stress points and they're like, I want to roll to patch myself up and clear some of these hit points.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to just start bandaging and whatever, first aid. And then you can come along and be like, hey, for my downtime activity, I would like to, I don't know, give them a pep talk or a massage or something and clear some of their stress points. It promotes role play at the table so freaking well.
Really well.
And that is my favorite part of this so far. Like everything about this is the GM saying, okay, what does that look like?
Yep.
And that's my favorite part of D&D.
Yep.
That's my favorite part.
It's it's the best part of our tables.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really excited to definitely give this a shot and then return here and report our findings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to do a follow-up.
One final change that I want to talk about because it's really freaking cool, and we'll end on this because it's probably my favorite, which is a lot given the fact that we just talked about downtime. Death moves.
Okay. Jesus.
No more are the days of death saving throws. There are none.
Now.
If you are reduced to 0 hit points, if all of your hit points are filled up, you have death moves. 3 options. Embrace death and go out in a blaze of glory. Take 1 action at the GM's discretion, which becomes an automatic critical success, and then you cross through the veil. Option 2. Avoid death and face the consequences. You drop unconscious temporarily and work with your GM to describe how the situation gets much worse because of it. Then you roll a fear die. If its value is equal to or under your level, you take a scar. I'll get to that in a minute. You may not take any actions while unconscious. When you have any number of your marked hit points cleared by an ally or on your party's next long rest, you return to consciousness. A scar is a permanent injury as a result of something that happened. To take a scar, you cross off one of your hope slots, and it does not come back.
Wow. That's brutal.
And you can do that until you have crossed off your final hope slot, at which point you do not come back. Third option for your death move, risk it all. Roll your duality dice. If hope is higher, you stay on your feet and clear an amount of hit points and or stress equal to the value of the hope die.
Okay.
And you can divide the hope die value up between hit points and or stress however you'd like. If your fear die is higher, however, you cross through the veil of death. If the duality dice are tied, you stay on your feet and clear all hit points and all stress.
Oh my. Nice. That's cool.
I love it. That is another one that honestly I might just throw in as like, fuck death saving throws. We don't need them. We're going to do this instead.
Yeah.
Take 2d12 and roll for me when you die.
I think
I might put that in my campaigns now.
I think I like that one a lot, but it's definitely necessary to have it as an option.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if that's your only thing, like,
I mean, the one that you wouldn't be able to do is avoid death and face the consequences.
Yeah.
I would swap out avoid death for a regular ass saving throw. Death save.
Yeah. Yeah, but that is more in line with that.
Embrace death and go out in a blaze of glory. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I'm going to let you do that shit.
Of course.
If you are ready for a new character and you're like, this is the perfect time for my character to just do the last big thing and then be done. Like, hell yeah. Please tell me what that looks like. Yeah. Be dramatic. And then risk it all. How cool is that?
That's good.
Can you imagine just being like, oh, I rolled 2 7s on the D12s. I come back to life with all of my hit points.
I think if we're speaking in D&D terms, that sounds like a feat or some kind of gained ability.
maybe what I was thinking of is a connection with a deity.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, some kind of subclass ability.
Like, oh my god, oh, I'm getting goosebumps. So I just thought of, if someone chooses risk at all, immediate stop the game, pause, everyone leave the table but this one person.
Yeah.
And then I want, like, me as the GM talking to that player, all right, I want you to tell me who or what you are reaching out to for a second shot at this and how you are going to convince them to let you come back. They like tell you what they want to do, choose whatever skill they want to roll. I will set the difficulty based on what they said and who they're reaching out to. Yeah. If they succeed, all right, roll the 2d12. And I have to do some tweaking with it. Yeah. But basically,
I see the vision.
Yeah. Then giving the option to use risk it all. If the hope is higher, then you come back and you can use like a number of hit dice equal to the amount rolled or something like that. Or if you tie, then you come back all of your, like, basically you come back with having taken a long rest. Yeah. Like, just, and then be like, all right, now everyone else can come back to the table. Here's what happened. I think that would be so fucking cool, dude.
I'm into that.
All that to say, please go check out Daggerheart.
Yes.
Critical
it's on
Role.
Demiplane.
Yes.
app.demiplane.com/nexus/Daggerheart. That's a long URL. We'll put it on screen and in the description of every platform that is posted on, of course.
Heck yeah. Critical Role has done a phenomenal job with this. Like you mentioned earlier, they've also made another system, Candela Obscura, that is not really tied with D&D at all. Yeah. It's more along the lines of like a horror game kind of a thing, or mystery, like Call of Cthulhu. It's kind of closer to that.
Yeah, I would say mystery thriller type of thing.
Yeah. So check out all of those, and thank you for sitting in and listening to our insane ramblings. Yeah. And
we are, of course, not sponsored by the things that we cover on this show. We just find shit or are sent shit, and we want to talk about it. And of course, look at our sub number. It's not exactly high enough to be getting sponsored. That said, you could add one to it right this second.
Hit that subscribe button.
More importantly, I want you to send us the shit that you've been thinking about. If anything in this episode reminded you of something that you've played at your table or that you've been thinking of, I don't care which it is. Email it to us at summongreaterpod@gmail.com or at summongreater on Twitter.
Hell yeah.
We'll see y'all in the next one.
Bye-bye.